First in Indianapolis, telephone Channel 6.
Projection, we got a news bulletin. Stand by.
Good evening, everyone.
Tom Carnegie reporting.
Stand by, everyone.
You talk about a pioneering station in a market.
And I'm just so proud.
First on the air to technology like satellite trucks.
Derek Thomas for the news, Channel 6.
The memories of all the people that I've worked with.
It's one of the best jobs I've ever had.
Grateful that people let us into their living room every night. You know, what an honor that is.
70 years and going strong.
Hey, Swoop!
A rock star journalist.
Just the opportunity to do something that I love.
You have a good day and stay on top of the world.
"70 years together. RTV6, working for you.
Good evening. I'm Clyde Lee.
And I'm Dionne Willis. We are honored to be welcomed back into your homes to celebrate this milestone with you. 70 years together, RTV6, working for you.
You've trusted us to share your stories. We've helped you to witness history in the making and hopefully presented information that's led to improvements in the lives of you and your family. It's an awesome responsibility and one we don't take lightly.
I had the privilege of working for you for 14 years here at Channel 6, and for Clyde, it was 25. And tonight, we invite you to take a trip with us on our shared journey of the past 70 years. It all started on this day in 1949. May 30th, when Channel 6 went on the air, the first commercial TV station in Indiana. The call letters, WFBM, the network affiliation, CBS. Hoosiers read in the newspaper that the first live broadcast would be the 33rd Indianapolis 500 on Memorial Day. But the first program at 10 a.m. was not the race. Viewers tuning in for the historic day saw a documentary on racing called The Crucible of Speed, with film from the 1946 Indianapolis 500. It was shot in color, but aired in black and white.
You will find in every modern automobile abundant evidence of the improvements and new designs which were developed and tested in this crucible of speed. High compression engines, balloon tires, high octane fuel, four-wheel brakes, independent wheel suspension, even the rear view mirror. Such vital developments as these came straight from the 500-mile race to your car.
Then came the 500-mile race, broadcast live with just 3 cameras, one on the front stretch, one in the pits, and another at the southwest turn. The cameras actually built by WFBM technicians. Several thousand new TV viewers saw Bill Holland take the checkered flag.
That was day one, and for 70 years together, the mission has never changed, bringing you the stories that transformed our community, whether in moments of controversy, joy, or sadness.
Rafael Sanchez takes us through the decades, highlighting some of the events that brought us together.
First in Indianapolis, telephone Channel 6.
Since 1949.
Projection, we got a news bulletin. Stand by.
And through the decades.
Good evening.
Our commitment to working for you through dark moments.
They know that victims are buried beneath the rubble.
And days of inspiration.
I think it's time the community stands together.
Have sustained us as the sentinels of your stories.
I've interviewed presidents and first ladies and it's stars and all of that, but it's the ordinary people and the stories that really matter. Journalism is the rough draft of history, and you need to tell those stories in order to tell the truth about the world and the life that we live.
What could have caused
the worst I ever seen, and like I say, I never felt so helpless in my life.
On Halloween night, 1963, the unthinkable happened.
All the lighting was still on. The orchestra was still playing.
An explosion at the State Fairgrounds Coliseum during an ice show, killing 74 people and injuring more than 400. The deadly tragedy made an impact on public safety responders, as well as on a young news organization forced to put the moment in perspective.
One whole wall of the Coliseum inside was fire, and it was just an extraordinary experience.
The 1960s were turbulent, with the country heading to war in Vietnam, and the assassinations of Presidents John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I'm only going to talk to you just for a minute or so this evening. Because
Indianapolis thrust into the spotlight on April the 4th, 1968. On that day, Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy had a campaign stop in Indianapolis. He was the one to tell a large crowd gathered at a Northside park that Dr. King had been assassinated.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
And he said the worst thing in the world would be to break out into acts of violence or do anything other than to be calm, to absorb it, and try to live lives of peace. And that really, I think, calmed the crowd that night.
As the war in Vietnam raged,
President Ford has ordered the first major reorganization.
Indiana searched for its footing in a rapidly changing post-Watergate era. In 1977, Anthony Kiritzis stunned Hoosiers as he held a real estate executive hostage at gunpoint for 3 days. On that third day, Kiritzis held a news conference that Channel 6 aired live.
There was a lot of debate because, as you recall, Tony was spewing his foul-mouthed vitriol at the world.
And nobody really knew for sure what they were dealing with. And you didn't want to do anything to cause him to kill his hostage. But, you know, you were trying to cooperate, but at the same time, you've got a responsibility to report the news. Everybody was just glad it was over, and nobody got hurt.
Live from WRTV, Indianapolis.
The 80s ushered in the Reagan Revolution in Indiana. Ryan White's revelation would put a face to the AIDS crisis. 13-year-old Ryan was diagnosed with AIDS in 1984 following a blood transfusion. He was expected to live 6 months, but instead lived for nearly 6 years, passing away in 1990.
The people who were infected with HIV were scared. The people who didn't know much about it were scared. And Ryan White became the national symbol of overcoming stigma.
The teen story drew the attention of fellow Hoosier native Michael Jackson. Jackson, Elton John, and First Lady Barbara Bush attended his funeral.
We heard an explosion, turned around and seen a fireball.
The morning of October the 20th, 1987.
A day that I will never forget.
It was just unbelievable.
Boom, booms like that, and the building kind of shook.
A military jet crashed into the Ramada Inn on the city's west side.
We were all dispatched to that location.
I had never covered anything like that.
10 people were killed.
It was chaotic.
We were live continuously.
It was hard not to be moved by all the smoke and the flames and the charred building.
Mike Tyson arrived by cab.
A tip to RTV6 reporter Jack Reinhardt generated one of the most sensational headlines of the 1990s, involving then boxing superstar Mike Tyson.
And so I immediately jump up in the middle of the newsroom and yell, I need a live truck and a photographer at the city-county building right now.
In 1991, Tyson was accused of raping a beauty pageant contestant in Indianapolis.
And everybody's looking at me like, what? And so I went, and so I did my live shot, did about a 3-minute live shot down at the city-county building. And this was at 5 o'clock, and then I did another one at 6, and I came back to the station, and already we were getting calls from around the country. And then shortly from around the world.
Are you denying that any sex occurred at all with the victim?
No, I'm not denying anything.
Tyson was convicted in 1992 and served time in an Indiana prison. As we entered the dawn of a new century, the way that we traveled, entered a public building, or thought about security, changed forever. In 2001, the horror of September the 11th, the nation attacked.
50,000 people worked there. Now many of them are feared dead. Others.
Channel 6 news crews followed Hoosier first responders to Ground Zero and shared stories of anguish, anxiety, and the aspirations of people to never forget. In February 2005, little Kudrat Wardak captured the hearts of central Indiana.
I'd never seen the community embrace someone the way they did this child.
The Indiana National Guard and Rotary helped get the boy from Afghanistan to Riley Hospital for Children to receive life-saving heart surgery.
He was just a beautiful little boy.
After his recovery, the boy went home in April. A Channel 6 news crew went along for the journey. The celebration would require consolation.
They informed us that Kudrat had passed away this morning.
Following Kudrat's unexpected death 2 days after returning home.
It was very troubling because you were like, they went through all this time to do something very good for humanity, and then he passes away.
Porters, the photographers, the servicemen and women were all crying. I mean, we all felt the pain, and from what I understand, people here in the Hoosier State felt the same way.
In August 2011, the deadly State Fair stage collapse would scar the annual event at the fairgrounds.
We had been on the air covering it all night long, and it just hit me, the fact that the BBC was even interested in it. I knew this was something that was causing shockwaves around the world.
That tragedy would later lead to changes in safety standards for outdoor concerts around the world.
You have experiences through this work that I don't think most professions give you. And it helps shape you. It helps you grow up. It helps you to be more open-minded. It helps you to be more aware of the depth and beauty and the conflicts and all the things that make life happen in a community and in a state.
The twister came through the center of the town, destroying everything in its path.
Stories that have connected us since 1949. Fractions of history that in total are a fabric of our shared humanity.
Derek Thomas for the news, Channel 6.
You've watched countless journalists deliver the news here on Channel 6 since 1949.
But the man who started it all from a studio on Monument Circle was Gilbert Forbes, our first TV anchor. The voice of Gilbert Forbes was already well known in Indiana after more than a decade on WFBM radio. He was considered an authoritative, no-nonsense journalist who served as WFBM radio correspondent during World War II. A new special produced in late 1958 gives us a glimpse of Forbes in our early years of TV.
And Fidel Castro's rebels seem to have things in hand outside Havana and Santiago. There are government troops in there still. The thought occurs to me tonight, Ken, as you produce this news show, that we began 1958 with something of a shadow of a Sputnik, and we wound up in the brilliance of the Atlas, and I hope 1959 does as well.
Forbes continued his association with the station until his death in 1961. By this time in our history, we were an NBC station owned by Time Life and had already spent a decade at our new, larger studio on Meridian Street, where we still are today.
But more changes were to come. By 1967, when Ken Beckley joined the anchor team, you could watch Channel 6 in full color. Then, as the 70s arrived, Ken announced the news that would lead to new owners and a new name.
McGraw-Hill Incorporated, which proposes buying Channel 6 from Time Incorporated, today asked the Federal Communications Commission to change the call letters of the station. Channel 6's call letters would be WRTV if approved by the Commission, which also must approve sale of the station.
WFBM became WRTV in June of 1972.
That was a bit of a challenge for us because you know, everything, WFBM, woof boom. A lot of your viewers would remember the words woof boom as being commonly used for especially WFBM, AM and FM. But we became WRTV, and so the station management required that going into each commercial break during the newscast, we had to say, WRTV, we are TV, to get across this WRTV. And we got so tired of it and didn't want to do it, but they insisted, and they said that once you are just so sick of it, you can't say it again, the public finally will grasp that it is WRTV.
And while the call letters haven't changed since 1972, we left NBC and became an ABC station in 1979, and then joined the E.W. Scripps family on January 1st, 2012.
Ken Beckley is just one of the many Channel 6 alums who are members of the Indiana Broadcasters Hall of Fame. Another is Tom Carnegie.
Sports director Dave First joins us from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway with that chapter of our history.
Clyde and Dion, thanks. Channel 6 has been associated with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway really since day one, airing the 1949 race that day. And the Speedway honoring the history of the TV station. How about that? Lighting up the scoring pylon here at the track. 70 years and counting. Now, part of the Channel 6 story is a very special relationship with a legend here at the track and also Channel 6, Tom Carnegie. You'd know that voice anywhere, but where you loved it was when it was broadcasting sports. Channel 6, then known as WFBM, aired its first Indianapolis 500 in 1949. The station hired Tom Carnegie in 1953. That voice, this station, hooked up for a ride of a lifetime.
A source of particular pride is the fact that Channel 6 was the very first station to have a daily show from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We called it Trackside.
Trackside 6. Sportscaster Craig Roberts joined Carnegie one day on Trackside when the weather was less than ideal.
Now it's starting to hail, and it's coming down real good, I can tell you that.
This is live hailstorm.
This is really a lot of fun out here at the Speedway. I'm sure you'd like to join us if you could.
The audience joined Carnegie all over the world.
Tom Carnegie reporting from the 19th Olympiad.
He was accompanied on that adventure with producer-director Julio Fernandez.
Tom was a wonderful person, and we went to Mexico in 1968 to cover the Olympics because we had a lot of Indiana athletes, especially swimmers and divers. So the station decided, well, maybe we should cover that ourselves.
Carnegie's globetrotting did not stop there. After Jimmy Clark won the 1965 Indy 500, he visited Scotland to get a behind-the-scenes glimpse of the Flying Scot. Channel 6 produced a documentary with that title. Carnegie many times called Clark his favorite driver. In between gathering up close and personal insights for viewers, Carnegie was entertaining his colleagues.
If that Carnegie says howdy good sports just once more, I'm going to scream.
Howdy good sports. Tom Carnegie reporting.
He had a great sense of humor. You know, he had that big, deep voice, and it sounded sometimes pretty gruff and everything, but he always had jokes to tell, and he always kept things light and lively.
He was so irascible and so cutting and so funny. He was unique.
While blazing a trail for his own Hall of Fame career, he identified and guided young broadcasters at Channel 6.
I'm most grateful for the opportunity that Tom Carnegie gave me. You know, he opened the door for me as an 18-year-old kid who had no idea what he was doing. But when that door was cracked, I was bound and determined to stick my foot in it.
That foot got him a job as weekend anchor at Channel 6.
Sports with Brian Hammonds.
Hammonds later worked for 21 years as an anchor at the Golf Channel.
Well, when you're the two-time...
Chris Denary, the television voice of the Indiana Pacers, interned under Carnegie.
When I got the Pacers job in 2006, I saw Tom at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he said, "You made it. You made it." And I think that was, of all the things that people have said to me in my career, that meant the most. because I was there by his side as an intern, 30 years prior, and he told me I'd made it.
It is a new track record.
From his contributions at the track to his love of high school basketball.
Tom Carnegie from Arlington for Channel 6 Sports.
To his work in the studio, Carnegie had his foot on the gas, flat out, all the way.
This is our first anniversary broadcast without Tom. He passed away in 2011. And also our first without another Channel 6 legend, Howard Caldwell. Howard passed away in 2017 at the age of 92.
He was the gentleman journalist, a consummate professional, and a walking encyclopedia when it came to Channel 6 and the city. Derek Thomas joins us with the story that began in 1959.
We first met Howard Caldwell on film and in black and white, but he carved out a career that was live and in color. For half our 70 years, he anchored our coverage.
Howard Caldwell brings you a special report of the Republican Convention with reports from Bob Gamble in Convention Hall.
Good evening. Members of the Indiana delegation met in caucus late this afternoon.
The year was 1960. Howard Caldwell had already logged 1 year at the anchor desk. In addition to his local duties, he covered national and international stories. In 1966, he was the first American journalist to interview Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi.
I wonder if you're thinking about television for India one of these days.
I was thinking of it very much, and I continue to do so, because I'm fully convinced that the visual impact is so much more convincing to a person than just reading or even listening.
No one understood the power of television more than Howard. When he returned to his Hoosier homeland after that interview, he was greeted at the airport by bagpipers, his wife Lynn, and their daughters. Globetrotting was fine, but family came first. It was a delicate balance skillfully handled throughout his career. A career that took him to the scene of tragedies like the 1963 Coliseum explosion at the State Fairgrounds.
I never felt so helpless in my life. I've been braced for maybe see 4 or 5 people killed, but when you come in and you're stepping over maybe 25 or 30, others screaming for help.
Even though he was our anchor man, action in the field was a part of his DNA.
He would volunteer to go out on a spot news story. If spot news story happened at night and they didn't have anybody to send, he'd say, okay, I'll go. And you don't see that very often. He's just, just a fine human being.
You will find such comments a recurring theme from his colleagues. Ken Beckley was his first co-anchor beginning in 1973.
Howard was a gem. We got along so well. Our personalities were much the same. We didn't get rattled. We were rather calm people. And I think that's something that you need to be if you're going to be an anchor.
376 cars.
Clyde Lee arrived to co-anchor with Howard in 1976. They bonded on the screen and off.
He was the person that you should be no matter what career you're in. He's just a quality guy. I'll always miss him.
What was missing from the anchor desk was a woman. Enter Tracy Horth.
I had the opportunity to anchor with them, which is really unbelievable. To have the opportunity to sit at an anchor desk with both of those gentlemen was very incredible for me.
The integration of more women anchors continued in 1987.
The index fell 0.1% in February.
I won the lottery. I mean, everybody was terrific, but I mean, to be working alongside Howard was, it was absolutely special.
It's still being talked about tonight.
Dionne Willis arrived that same year and was paired on the same newscast with Clyde, who she later married. But she is effusive in her praise of Howard, who was inducted into the Indiana Broadcast Hall of Fame in 1991.
He set the tone in the newsroom for what we were, what we tried to do every day, the high standards. He just excelled at telling a story simply, purely, and well.
He was a consummate professional, a journalist, and most of all, a gentleman in every way.
And we still miss him.
Yep.
And this is a notable year for Derek as well. In April, he marked 40 years at Channel 6.
Still ahead,
You are a parasite. Parasite. Parasite.
Rafael Sanchez wears the Parasite name proudly, but he wasn't the first to answer the Call 6 for help, the long-standing Channel 6 tradition of working for you, changing state law, and uncovering injustice.
I jokingly said, well, honey, if you're looking for a star, here I are.
Barbara Boyd, barrier buster, paving the way for women and African-American journalists. And it all started with a phone call.
Welcome to At the Zoo.
It's not only news at Channel 6. Kevin Gregory, Harlow Hickenlooper, and Jim Gerard entertained you for years. This and more. When 70 years together, RTV6 Working for You continues. Storm Team 6 is here. Power or no power. Streaming, tweeting, live on Facebook. Working for you.
Oh my God, touchdown!
When severe weather strikes and you need to keep your family safe, RTV6 is the only station to stay on the air throughout the storm.
We have crews all over affected areas.
RTV6 is working for you.
Discover why Newport Aquarium is the shark capital of the Midwest during Shark Summer, while one kid gets in free with each full-price adult. See dozens of sharks, some you can even touch. Dare to cross Shark Bridge over shark-infested waters and visit the Shark Nursery. Plus, you'll discover the new exhibit, Freshwater Falls, and play in the new Jim Henson Splash and Bubbles Reef Town Adventure. But hurry, this one kid free offers only through July 21st during Shark Summer, and only at NewportAquarium.com.
Blackburn and Green has been serving you locally in Indiana for almost 30 years. Call Blackburn and Green for a free personal meeting with your local hometown attorney. Experienced, aggressive, and tough. Blackburn and Green, attorneys for injured people, committed to be the best.
Big bucks, no whammies, big bucks, here we go, stop!
Introducing Game Show's worst nightmare.
Press Your Luck premieres Wednesday, June 12th on ABC.
Here we go.
Want to play?
Higher or low?
Guess right and win big.
Oh, you thought these were normal size, didn't you?
Joel McHale hosts Card Sharks. Premieres Wednesday, June 12th on ABC.
We do things a little differently here.
Stand by.
Good evening.
We're groundbreakers.
Stay on top of the world.
Media innovators. But what really sets us apart is this. The work you don't see. The careful consideration that goes into each story. The intentional choices we make every day to spend more time on news that's personal to you.
And we think that's terribly exciting. That's why we do it.
When RTV6 broadcast the 1949 Indy 500, no one knew Indianapolis would grow into the vibrant city it is today. Thanks, Channel 6, for leading the way. Congratulations on 70 years of service from the Hogsett family.
Call 6 Investigates is working for you.
Uncovering wrongdoing. So we can't talk to you about the taxes. Go.
Connecting the dots. Are you going to give people their money back?
Exposing what's hidden.
My thanks to you.
See what Call 6 uncovered today, only on RTV6.
Welcome back to 70 Years Together, RTV6, Working for You. Working for You is woven into the fabric here at Channel 6.
It's our hallmark, something we do every day. Anchors Mark Mullins and Amanda Starantino are here to show us how our Call 6 team leads that charge.
One of our most important jobs as journalists is to give a voice to the voiceless and hold the powerful accountable.
And for decades, you've always known you can call 6 for help.
Call 6 for help.
Call 6 was launched in the early 80s as the station's investigative unit.
Becky Mosley worked out here about a half a dozen times.
Former reporter Ben Morstan literally answered calls for help from our viewers. Several new homeowners contacted Ben about a local builder not honoring the terms of its contracts. Ben reached out to the builder, and they agreed to make good with the customers. But in this story, as in many others, Ben promised to stay connected until the issue was fully resolved.
If the company doesn't take care of your problems within a reasonable amount of time, once you've put them in writing, let me know.
Why is fraud being committed?
Get out my house!
Why are you pushing me though? Is your business to ruin people's lives?
In the late 90s, the tradition of helping Hoosiers was passed on to Rafael Sanchez.
It was always about, I want to be like Ben when it came to reporting because he did it the right way. And
You can't beat that when you do it the right way.
Get out of my face. Move out of the way. You are a buffoon with a microphone.
Is that because you get caught every time?
While investigating a real estate scam in 2006, Raphael gained a nickname he proudly embraces.
You are a parasite, you incompetent parasitic
Our investigation into Spectrum Property Group and their real estate scheme led the Attorney General's office to take legal action, shutting down all of their businesses. And the Metropolitan Indiana Board of Realtors used our investigation to warn and protect thousands from being ripped off.
I'm so happy that I was a parasite. I wear that as a badge of honor because those were guys taking advantage of people. And so if we're able to expose people that are doing wrong things, people that are trying to cheat people or take advantage of grandma or grandpa, I'm all for that exposure.
The best way to stay competitive and protect the business for long term is to move production from our facility in Indianapolis to Monterrey, Mexico.
The Carrier announcement in 2016 sent shockwaves across Indiana and would become a central theme of the 2016 presidential campaign.
So we're going up the hill to get a better view of the Carrier plants.
Raphael was the only local reporter to travel to Monterrey, Mexico, where Carrier planned on moving the jobs. Back home in Indiana, our Carrier stories also caught the attention of then-Governor Mike Pence, who called a high-ranking executive with Carrier's parent company to the State House.
Mr. McDonough, good morning and welcome to Indianapolis. Will you change your mind? Will you change your mind and keep the jobs?
Looking forward to a great meeting with the governor.
Sir, would you work for $3 an hour?
Looking forward to discussing with the governor the transition for our workers and getting back to business.
So I take it you would not work for $3 an hour, sir?
Following that meeting, Pence became Donald Trump's running mate. In December of 2016, the men would announce that the plant would remain open in Indy. More than 1,000 jobs would stay, but the men failed to mention that about 500 jobs would still be sent to Mexico. Carrier, disapproving of our investigative stories, also banned Raphael from their facility on the day of that announcement.
And if they don't let me inside, that's okay. I will still do my job.
It brings in $6 billion a year in sales tax.
Reporter Kara Kenny joined Call 6 in 2009 and quickly made an impact, breaking stories and prompting change at the highest levels.
Dr. Thompson, we'd like to ask you some questions. What do you want to say to the taxpayers?
In 2011, Call 6 exposed former Wayne Township School Superintendent Terry Thompson's golden parachute, $1 million payout of taxpayer money. Hundreds of people filled an auditorium, outraged.
Please explain to me and our community how you thought of the children first as you approved this outrageous golden parachute.
Board members did not understand the contract they signed off on since the dollar amounts were not listed.
What is your response to what the taxpayers had to say tonight? Do you have any response to them?
Mary McDermott Lang, please. Thank you.
But you're the school board president. You don't have any response to what the taxpayers had to say?
Kara's reporting helped spur a new state law calling for more transparency in superintendent contracts. That means anytime your school district hires a new superintendent or renews a contract, they have to hold a public hearing, and the contract must clearly state how much it will cost taxpayers.
Our commitment to investigative journalism is stronger than ever.
Solutions, resolutions, digging deep into issues. Our Call 6 Investigates team is working for you. Clyde and Dion.
Thank you, Mark and Amanda. You also count on us to make sure that you are ready for Indiana weather.
You know the old saying, if you don't like the weather now, wait a few minutes and it will change. Chief Meteorologist Kevin Gregory walks us through 7 decades of change.
One of the primary reasons people watch the news is for the weather. It really is one of our most important jobs. Our first chief meteorologist, Bill Crawford, realized it early on. He arrived in 1950, a veteran Air Force meteorologist, also pursuing a career in dentistry. He stayed for 15 years, dentist by day, broadcast meteorologist by night.
If it doesn't rain on Judd's umbrella, Judd will conclude, and rightly so, that it is not raining.
Early forecaster Judd Ashmore shows a black marker was key to the weather presentation in the early days.
Clouds are going to be spreading into Indiana tomorrow from the north and from the west.
The importance of broadcast meteorology was pivotal on April 11th, 1965. The Palm Sunday tornadoes were the deadliest in Indiana history, killing 137 Hoosiers and injuring more than 1,700. One of the 10 tornadoes that day hit Rushville in Howard County. The F4 tornado, with winds over 200 miles per hour, damaged or destroyed 90% of the town's buildings.
Now, taking a look at the statewide weather pattern, very light rain covers the southern two-thirds of the Hoosier state.
Chief meteorologist Bob McLean arrived in May of 1972.
First day on the job, what do you remember when you walked in the door?
Kind of being overwhelmed because I had worked for a couple of years in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but I mean, this was a big-time operation. And they actually had weather equipment that you could use to help get information to prepare your weathercast.
The super outbreak of tornadoes was his first large-scale challenge. On April 3rd and 4th, 1974, 148 tornadoes swept across 13 states, including Indiana. In all, 21 tornadoes ripped across 38 Indiana counties. Memories of the blizzard of '78 are also frozen in Bob's mind. The first ever blizzard warning for the entire state was issued just before 4 p.m. on January 25th. Over the next 30 hours, the storm produced wind gusts over 50 miles per hour, temperatures hovering around zero, nearly 16 inches of snow, and drifts measured in feet. The state was brought to a standstill.
I walked out here on Meridian Street, I trudged out, and it was like one of those Rod Serling Twilight Zone episodes, because I was the only person there.
Do the swoop!
Swoop McClay!
You might say it's pretty easy to get animated about Indiana weather.
It takes that moisture-laden air and throws...
Our state's weather extremes may explain why Bob McLean transformed into Swoop McLean.
I think it was due to the fact of all of the sweeping motions that I would do, and people would say that he sweeps, and then it kind of just evolved into swoop.
Kevin Gregory's out live with...
I arrived at WRTV 6 in 1989. At the time, Ben Morriston and I were anchoring the 5-minute news and weather cut-ins during Good Morning America. Less than 5 years later, I was covering an all-time weather event. The coldest morning ever in Indianapolis. It happened so early in the morning there weren't any camera operators yet, so I asked the director to put at least my voice on the air so I could let viewers know we'd set the all-time coldest temperature in Indianapolis history at 27 below zero.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chief Meteorologist Bob McLean.
And I'm Channel 6 weatherman Kevin Gregory. This, as you know, is the time of the...
Over the last 7 decades, the forecasters themselves have changed, technology has changed, but the daily challenge remains the same.
For afternoon highs across the area, with those partly to mostly cloudy.
Accurately predicting the weather.
And while we're celebrating our 70th anniversary, Chief Meteorologist Kevin Gregory will mark his 30th year at Channel 6 this summer.
He's also among the select few who've had the privilege of hosting our own local programs. We hope this brings back some fond memories.
Welcome to At the Zoo. I'm Kevin Gregory. I'm going to stop, and we'll see if Eli decides to stop, too. Hold on, big guy.
When Kevin Gregory arrived in 1989, he was also tapped to host a year-old program called At the Zoo. With the opening of the new zoo on Washington Street, it was the perfect time to give Hoosiers a behind-the-scenes look at all the happenings there. It was only expected to generate 13 weeks of new half-hour programs, but it lasted 10 years.
As a result of that, we did some traveling. We went to South Africa and did the Okavango Delta on safari and did a special on RTV6.
I can't believe the devastation from the elephants. I mean, they just flat out, it looks, people in Indiana, you'd relate it to a tornado going through a certain area.
After we did that, another company called us and said, would you go to the Galapagos Islands? And we went to the Galapagos Islands and shared that with viewers.
This is just so hard to get used to, how calm the bird is sitting right there, and we're no more than arm's reach. We're closer to this albatross than you are to your TV.
Another time, since the Indianapolis Zoo led the way as far as artificial insemination of African elephants, we went to Kenya and to Nairobi and did a tie-in there of how our population of elephants is helping the world population and the connection between the two.
At the Zoo won 10 Emmy Awards for children's programming. And kids in the 60s grew up with Harlow Hickenlooper, Curly Myers, and Captain Star. The trio were the stars of the weekend children's show All Hands on Deck. Harlow and Curly also hosted the Three Stooges show from 1960 to 1972 on Saturday mornings. But it was Harlow, Hal Fryer in real life, who stole the show. He delighted the kids by getting shaving cream pies in the face and his distinctive rendition of Happy Birthday.
Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday.
Another daily feature in the 60s was the Jim Girard Show. It offered a mix of chit-chat, celebrity interviews, and music.
Live from the Channel 6 studios, the Jim Girard Show with Charlotte Daniels, the George Nikoloff Orchestra, and Jim's special guests. And now, here's Jim.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome, one and all.
Jim won numerous awards for the show while at Channel 6, including a Casper Award for public service. And we can't forget Frances Farmer. The Hollywood actress arrived in Indianapolis in 1958 and was offered a job at Channel 6 as afternoon hostess for daily movies. For the next 6 years, the top-rated show in Central Indiana was Frances Farmer Presents. There weren't many women in the newsroom in the early years of Channel 6.
So when Barbara Boyd joined the staff in 1969, she made history. And she started opening doors for journalists then and now.
She was the first African-American female television reporter in Indianapolis and later the first African-American female anchor.
Derek Thomas shares Barbara's story, one that continues to make an impact today.
All the food that you see on this table was bought for $50.
Barbara Boyd had purpose, personality, and passion. You could not ignore her. She started her journalism career late, but she made up for lost time.
I jokingly said, well, honey, if you're looking for a star, here I are. He said, you want to do it, really? I said, yeah, what I got to do?
In 1969, a 40-year-old Barbara Boyd was the office manager for the local Head Start program when she answered a phone call from someone at Channel 6 looking for talent. A star was born. She was hired and learned on the job. The audience learned to love her.
I'm thankful I had the courage to see my doctor in time, and I was lucky because I did do that.
In 1973, she reported on her own mastectomy from her Community East hospital bed.
I always admired her deeply for that because that was really groundbreaking. A person just didn't do that in those days.
Barbara did do that. The 7-minute-long story captured attention, sparked hundreds of phone calls, and personalized breast cancer.
From that story, I asked Bob Gamble, I said, can we do a half-hour special on it? So Bob said, well, do we have to show a breast? Yeah, Bob, I think we do. You know, he allowed me to do that. And from that, I traveled around the country being interviewed about breast cancer and the importance of early detection, self-breast examination.
The Bob Gamble that Barbara talked about was the Indiana Broadcast Hall of Fame news director who hired her. He knew he was getting a motivated overachiever, but he couldn't have known the impact that she was going to have.
I just love her. Barbara is funny and smart, and she always made me feel important, and she always supported me and helped me. She's a role model, and she actually was a huge barrier buster in the business.
Read the warranty carefully.
If you're interested in getting cash from your trash, perhaps couponing or refunding is for you.
$83.15. Well, that's inflation for you.
That barrier buster delivered Consumer Reports with common sense, compassion, and charm.
I wanted to prove that women could walk, talk, chew gum, have babies, go home and cook dinner and still do this job. And I think I did that. And if you look around today in a newsroom, you don't see one or two women. More than half the newsroom female. Every station, just about, has a black female anchor. I feel good about that. I think I had a little something to do with that.
Not only did she open the door for me and just make it easier for me to excel in this business, she didn't stop there. She continually kept talking to me, as she does so many other people in this business as well. She wants to see you succeed. She's your friend, but she also will tell you what you need to hear.
What you heard a lot during her tenure was,
You have a good day and stay on top of the world. You have a good day and stay on top of the world. You have a good day and stay on top of the world.
Barbara recently celebrated her 90th birthday. Her mother, affectionately known as Peaches, lived to be 103. Barbara's goal is to live to be 104.
Yes.
And speaking of 104, next year will be the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500, and Channel 6 is a rich part of that history.
Sports Director Dave First takes us on a fast lap through Indiana sports history.
175,000 attend the Automotive Festival of the Year.
We've mentioned on May 30th, 1949, WFBM Channel 6 signed on as the first Indy station with the first live television broadcast of the 1949 Indianapolis 500. So what was next? Well, glad you asked. 2 years later, on March 17th, 1951, WFBM Channel 6 brought you Indiana's game. The IHSAA granted WFBM the rights to air the Indiana High School Basketball State Championship game. Muncie Central defeated Evansville Rights. Then in 1954, maybe the most iconic game in Indiana high school basketball history. Bobby Plump hit a basket with just seconds remaining, sending Milan to a 32-30 win over heavy favorite Muncie Central at Butler Fieldhouse. This historic matchup also marked the first time Tom Carnegie and Tony Hinkle would team up on the call for a state championship game on Channel 6. They would become the voices for state basketball finals for nearly 20 years on WFBM and WRTV. Crispus Attucks High School, led by future NBA Hall of Famer Oscar Robertson, won back-to-back state championships in 1955 and 1956.
Oscar Robertson from the corner. Terrific.
But even more significant, Attucks became the first all-black school in the nation to win a state title. Fast forward to 1967 with the creation of the Indiana Pacers in the American Basketball Association.
Pacer fans are loyal, the Pacers have good promotions, and the Pacers are interesting to watch.
The 1968 Summer Olympics in Mexico, Indiana athletes, especially swimmers and divers who attended IU, made quite a splash in Mexico City. WFBM was there, legendary sportscaster Tom Carnegie and producer Chico Fernandez. 1984, who knew a fleet of Mayflower moving vans would forever change the city of Indianapolis?
I remember thinking at the time that that was going to be a big story for the city, not just a sports story, but a big story that would impact a city that was just beginning to kind of find its stride. Its downtown was beginning to undergo a bit of a renaissance, and we see what has happened over the decades since then.
We were debugging the room last night and we found what appears to be a spy for the Syracuse team. But we can take care of that.
Smart takes the shot. Indiana wins the championship. Keith Smart is the hero.
Can you believe what has happened to you in the last year?
Hey, this is a fairy tale, I guess. Maybe I'll wake up from it next year sometime and then believe it. But right now, I don't.
The biggest sporting event to hit town other than the 500 had to be the 87 Pan Am Games. Years of planning went into the effort, and it paid off with a fairly smoothly run set of events.
1990, one name, Damon Bailey.
Never in the history of high school basketball has there ever been a crowd this big, 40,000 plus.
Supporters say the days of the Milan Miracle are long gone. Insist a 4-class state tournament will give more schools, students, and communities a chance for success.
Hopefully they're correct and I'm wrong, and that we'll have a great tournament out there and still be the #1 tournament in the nation.
The year 2000, the Pacers went to the NBA Finals for the first and only time. RTV6's Derek Thomas.
It seemed like slow-motion parabolic rain. Down came the threes, down went the Knicks.
Unfortunately, Indiana would lose to Shaq, Kobe, and the Lakers in 6 games. September 10th, 2000, dark day for Indiana basketball. IU fired Bob Knight. RTV6's Rafael
Sanchez. With darkness, the demands for the return of Coach Bobby Knight came with destruction.
At least 2 lampposts near the president's home were pulled down within 15 seconds.
In the next 2 days, I'm going to meet with you, so let's just kind of go on back. You'll see
the 2006-2007 football season, we witnessed the moment Peyton Manning raised the Lombardi Trophy after the Colts beat the Bears on a rainy Miami night to win Super Bowl 41.
It was the best experience ever. We covered stories. We were on the air all the time. We were with the fans. We were talking to the team. We actually got to sit and see the Super Bowl and see Prince perform at halftime.
From Indy winning a Super Bowl to Indy hosting one.
Super Bowl fans started showing up in downtown Indianapolis long before dawn.
We are here at Georgia and Meridian Street, where it is gridlock, I would say.
Our final stop on this 70-year journey, the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500 in 2016, an event so big, we spent 100 days leading up to the 500 airing our Road to 100 series, looking back at each year of the race from the beginning. The 100th running helped return the 500 to past glory. A crowd of 350,000 packed IMS. And for the first time in decades, we here at RTV6 were able to air the race live.
Whether covering sports or weather or the news, you've allowed us to be part of your lives for 70 years, but you've also been a big part of ours.
It's not only our responsibility to report the news, but to be active participants in the community, making a difference, meeting you and helping out where we can, and having a little fun along the way.
It's the 3rd annual Antique Auto Tour, presented by Eckrich and WFBM.
From 1959 until 1969, the Antique Auto Tour of more than 100 classic cars brought Channel 6 personalities into the surrounding communities. And boy, did they get noticed, attracting large crowds and getting the celebrity treatment.
WFBM celebrities were on hand too. Francis Farmer, Captain Starr, Howard Caldwell. Bill Crawford, our weatherman, brought us beautiful weather.
The tour returned for round 2 in 1989. Many new faces joined the parade of vintage cars on the 2-day trek.
It was just a great way, particularly for the smaller communities throughout Indiana, for us to go out and kind of thank them for their, patronage and being, and welcoming us into their home every night.
And we're still going.
We're still going. I think it's hard for us to believe there is so much joy, there is so much hope in this room.
In 1973, we started carrying the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Telethon on Labor Day weekend, adding local reports and features 3 years later.
Congratulations. Thank you, everybody.
It was a commitment that lasted more than 25 years and helped raise millions of dollars.
It was a 100% all-out effort by everybody on the staff. I mean, we were on the air for more than 24 hours. It was just a tremendous effort, and I think that was of great benefit.
Another outstanding commitment, supporting the United Negro College Fund.
Is everybody on the phone? Great.
Barbara Boyd, Angela Kane, Grace Trahan, James Adams, and I, among the hosts of the telethon seen on Channel 6 for more than a decade.
300,000.
The money raised gave financial support to African American students to attend historically black colleges. 1984, the year the Colts came to town.
Thank you very much.
Channel 6 started teaming up with Gleaner's Food Bank for a canned food drive.
Take your cans right here, folks.
Outside the dome before a home game.
I also want to thank Channel 6 because you've promoted this. You've had an awful lot to do with it. It wouldn't have happened without all of you at Channel 6.
It was a commitment that lasted more than a decade. In 1995, reporter Tracy Horth and Channel 6 partnered with the Mayor's Commission on Family Violence to raise awareness of the need for transitional housing for victims of domestic violence in Indianapolis. The campaign to open Coburn Place Safe Haven was born.
The campaign itself raised quite a bit of money, but what it really did was it brought important partners around the table, city leadership, corporate leaders, who recognized that we clearly had a problem in our city and we needed to meet that need. And through all of those partnerships, we were able to open Coburn Place.
Coburn Place opened its doors the following year to its first residents. For more than 20 years, RTV6 helped to usher in the holiday season with the televising of the Circle of Lights on Monument Circle.
We are live with thousands of people down.
Channel 6 was the first to bring you a live TV program complete with entertainment and Santa, culminating in the lighting of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument.
Welcome to the RTV6 Toy Shop. By now, you've heard of the RTV6 Toy Drive.
And our commitment to providing joy at Christmas hasn't wavered. 2019 will mark the 19th year of the RTV6 Toy Drive. We're just the facilitators. We couldn't do it without you, who've donated tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of thousands of toys to help put smiles on the faces of Central Indiana kids at Christmas.
From making a difference to working for you. That's been the Channel 6 way from day one and our goal for the future.
So thank you for sharing this journey with us. We're honored to have been a part of your lives for the past 70 years. And here's to the next 70 years together. Thanks for joining us, and good night.
Good night.